if the lights go on down that pathway every time, takes a lot of working a different path before you start to feel you've got a choice between two pathways, because habit and pattern take you down the deep rutted path.
It's a really interesting analogy again, yeah, to kind of equate it to almost some sort of structural synapse.
Yeah, we just can't help it. And there's been, in a way, been written about a number of times. Chris brings this quote in, Livesley, I think, about forgetting. Each generation seems to sort of forget. There's a kind of, effectively, getting back to the point, there's a sort of trauma, there's a cloud of trauma somewhere in this story, and so personality is sort of, I've got it, so let's use it to think humanely about trauma, brackets possibly Henderson, and then we close the Henderson because we don't need it, and anyway, and all the othering goes on again. I think why do we feel better when we evoke that discourse? It's because it's located in the other person and their difficult behaviour, and ultimately, of course, that then stirs the hope that their difficult behaviour can be removed, and then the disease will be removed with them.
And do you think that hope is warranted? Do you think that's a...
Well, no, because it's like... well, it's not quite like... But it's like rehousing somebody. Well, there's so many glorious success stories within St Mungo's and Open Door and English churches about successful resettlements. So you might scratch your head and think, why is there a homelessness problem? But that's because we make people homeless faster than we rehouse them. So no, it doesn't work to either dismissively or creatively move people on, because we're making them faster than we can unmake them in those terms.
So you're talking something about not dealing with the root issue.
Yeah. And of course, at that point, one could justifiably say, "Well, hang on, you're the mental health team. You can't sort out all this other stuff," and that's true. But no, moving on. Scapegoating doesn't work. So if I had a tenner, for every time I'd sat with a team and said to them, "Okay, so and so has moved, but I noticed that you're still not comfortable. It hasn't worked. The ailment remains. How do we get hold of that? You must be disappointed because you were so hopeful that," and of course this is sometimes staff, not patients, but you were so hopeful that it would all leave with so-and-so, or that the wrongly placed patient would get rightly placed and then it would be okay again. Nor is it. Well, that's partly because it never was located in that one person in the first place.
Right.
So
okay.
I'm always making that intervention. It's my stock in trade.
And do you think that the label, the diagnosis, and the construct of personality disorder, what role do you think that has? I mean, you were listing sort of symptoms earlier on.
Yes.
Are they symptoms? Manipulative,
yes.
Attention seeking. Sort of traits associated with what we would understand as
yes, they're not in the list, are they? But labile affect. Because you were asking me about borderline, and I suppose I came back at you more broadly than that. But yeah, I do think that the rubric of personality, the diagnostic frame of personality disorder, was or has somewhere along the way been an attempt to describe something. It's not a completely made up thing. There's presentations and we've got a kind of group presentations together, however loosely, or we can't think because we can't allocate resources. So we, the system of care, got to have a way of thinking about categories, even if that always denies the individual predicament. And this is another one of my bugbears. But once you make I've written about this. But once you have a rule for all, you have an excess and a problem of power. But at the same time, you can't have 100 rules for 100 patients because you can't allocate resources. So you've got to have some categories. So the classification of borderline personality disorder is a not in itself completely illegitimate attempt, in my view, to try to describe a presentation or a set of presentations. It's very problematic in all sorts.
In terms of the actual criteria of group.
Well, I don't think it's very effective, and it doesn't necessarily pick out the most meaningful aspects, and it misses out a whole load of other things, and it's pejorative and it's othering and it's gendered but a lot. But I'm just saying, somewhere in there, I would have a. I suppose I'm still clinically, I still find it helpful to have reference to the psychoanalytic frame of a borderline personality organisation, which I still think is a misnomer, but I think it has to do with identity and identity diffusion and fragmented or fragmentary experiences of the self, and instability of self states, that kind of language.
Okay.
And I find that a helpful reference point when thinking about clusters of presentations. I don't think it's anything to do with personality.
You don't think it's anything
I don't think it's anything to do with personality disorder.
Could you say a bit more why you think that? And
I don't think it's anything to do with disorder. But if we could separate out the borderline from everything that's got tagged onto and bring it back to the Freudian in and out of the edge of loss of reality orientation, liminality, then the liminal, let's say, there's something important in there as a psychotherapist sitting with, well, just as an alert. You think you're sitting with somebody. Well, it's a bit of a rash assumption, and I've sat with people, and I hope been open to them teaching me a little bit about what their self-experience is of who they think is sitting with me in that storyline, and it's not the same.
So you're sort of almost touching on what might be classified as sort of a dissociative kind of state almost, which is very interesting because given the prevalence of...
Yeah, so dissociation... Well, I mean, yes. So I am fundamentally, I suppose, talking about dissociation, and now that is a symptom that I associate with the liminal or the borderline that I don't think is on the checklist, which is interesting.
And why do you think that has been missed off the checklist?
Yeah,
I have my ideas.
Yeah,
but I'm really interested.
So I've never thought about this, but I don't think it is on the checklist. You maybe looked at the checklist more recently than I did, but I don't think it is there.
I think they mention it
in the paragraphs
within the. They can touch on it actually. They touch on it within the bottom line of transient psychotic, psychotic-like.
Okay.
So the DSM and the ICD differ in terms of.
Okay. Yes, you're right. Okay. Well, that's certainly that language has sort of crept in more a little bit at the edge of it, but it's certainly not what you kind of get in sort of lay terms around the team. you get the self-harm, and